My husband cut ties with his daughter after learning the truth, then she stormed into his office screaming for money. My husband, who's 40, and I, 34, have a pretty strong and stable relationship. We've been together for around 13 years. We don't have any kids of our own, but we play a big role in my nephew Mark's life. He's 4 and means the world to us. To give a little context, my husband does have a daughter, Laura, who's 16 now. But the only ones in his family who really keep in touch with her are his mom and, to a lesser extent, his dad. That's because Laura wasn't exactly conceived under honest circumstances. Her mother deliberately poked holes in the condoms to get pregnant. It turned into a whole messy ordeal. My mother-in-law begged my husband to be a father to Laura, but emotionally, he just couldn't do it. He even had to go to therapy to deal with everything. Her mom later admitted she did it so he'd feel obligated to stay with her out of responsibility. It didn't work. Legally, he's been paying child support, but that's where his involvement ends. Funny enough, I didn't hear any of this from him directly at first. It was actually my mother-in-law who brought it up. She sat me down and said she really liked me, and she hoped I'd help bridge a connection between my husband and Laura. I was completely thrown off. The way she said it made it seem like he was just being cold or careless. So I asked my husband about it because her version didn't sit right with me. He explained that he had planned to tell me before we moved in together, and to be fair, he had dropped hints about some complicated stuff. He then laid it all out, the whole truth. He even offered to bring me to therapy with him or let me read his psych reports if I wanted to understand more. His sister later confirmed everything and told me this issue was actually why she distanced herself from their parents. After that, things were calm for a while. Even the wedding went smoothly, no major drama. We set some clear boundaries, and for the most part, my MIL respects them. But she's still in regular contact with Laura and her mom, which we tolerate as long as she doesn't drag us into it. Things really started to heat up when my sister got pregnant with Mark. That's when my MIL started acting out. She began telling people cryptic things like, "Mark's not my first grandchild," trying to stir drama. It made my husband visibly uncomfortable. She kept trying to involve Laura in Mark's life, pushing for her to come to birthdays, the christening, family events. We made it very clear we weren't okay with that. Then she invited Laura and her mom to her birthday party a couple of times, and we just skipped the whole thing to avoid conflict. Recently though, things reached another level. Laura's apparently been really upset about not having her biological dad in her life. When we visited my MIL, she brought it up again. My husband immediately shut it down and walked out. I stayed back to gather our stuff since I had brought food, and I told her point blank it wasn't going to happen. According to MIL, Laura just wants to meet her dad because she's curious and feels like something's missing. She has a stepdad, and she's fine with him, but apparently it's not the same. Then my MIL said she was going to give Laura our home address and contact info because Laura was desperate to connect. That's when I lost it. I told her straight up if she even tried that, I'd call the police on every one of them. I also warned her that my sister-in-law would be furious when she found out and not to be surprised if she lost access to Mark altogether. My MIL called my husband cruel and accused me of encouraging him to be heartless to an innocent child. I told her that I get it, Laura's not to blame for how she came into the world, but let's be honest, would she be saying the same if it were a woman who was violated like this? Edit. Thanks to everyone who shared their thoughts, even if you think we're monsters for this. I do want to clarify a few things, though. I'm not trying to betray my husband. I asked for advice because I'm 100% on his side. The condom didn't just break. He was always careful, used protection, and she told him she was on the pill, too. But when he said he didn't want a baby and asked if she'd consider abortion or at least co-parenting boundaries, she came clean and said she'd tampered with the condoms so he'd be forced to stay. My MIL knows all of this. The only reason Laura's mother isn't in jail is because my MIL begged my husband not to press charges. He just wanted to move on. My father-in-law doesn't really pick sides anymore, he's neutral like Switzerland. But when this first came out, he was furious. Then my sister-in-law asked him how he'd feel if the same thing happened to her, and that seemed to shift his perspective. Things between MIL and my SAL are pretty strained now too. MIL once introduced Mark to Laura during a zoo visit without asking SAL first, and since then, she's no longer allowed to be alone with Mark. By law, my husband has to keep paying child support until Laura turns 18 or finishes school, depending on which comes later in our country. He's already prepared a will that leaves her the legal minimum, because here, you can't fully disinherit a child, but you can reduce their share. The rest is going to me and Mark, and that's driving my MIL crazy. My husband wants absolutely nothing to do with Laura. No letters, no meetings, nothing. And I have no intention of forcing him to change that. I honestly think my MIL ramped up her efforts once she saw how good my husband is with Mark. We even took Mark on a vacation recently. He dotes on him, and we're incredibly loving with him. We also spend a lot on him because we want to. We own our home, but for obvious reasons, it's in my name alone. I don't think Laura knows that detail, and even if she ever asks, I won't be the one to tell her. That's not my place. And frankly, no kid deserves to hear something like that from a stranger. Update 1. I really appreciate everyone who took time to respond, especially those who gave us the push to address this head-on. After I showed my husband the post and we read through a lot of your comments together, he finally said enough is enough. Yesterday morning, he texted both his mom and sister, asking to meet and talk things out. Mael responded right away and said we could come over that afternoon, and oh, by the way, Laura would be there too. We agreed to it. Misael and Bil met us at the door. They didn't want to go inside before we did. The tension was thick. Laura tried to hug everyone as soon as we walked in, but we asked her politely not to. Then she went in for a hug with my husband, and he was much more firm, told her not to touch him. Mael was acting overly cheerful, like she was trying to pretend this wasn't a huge deal. Meanwhile, Phil was just offering drinks and snacks like it was any other Sunday. It honestly felt like he was living in a different world. We all sat down. No one said a word for what felt like 5 straight minutes. Then, finally, my husband turned to Laura and said, "Please stop trying to reach out to me." Laura responded by saying he was her dad, and that she would need his help once she goes to university. She's planning to move to our city, and rent is expensive, so she figured he'd help her out financially. She pointed out that he clearly owns a home and seems to have money to spare. My husband shut that down immediately. He told her no, that he's been paying child support as required by law, and the moment he's no longer obligated to, that support stops. She looked hurt, but didn't stop. She turned to me and said that eventually, what belongs to my husband would go to her anyway. Mael had apparently explained inheritance laws to her, and Laura wanted to make sure we were on good terms when the time came to divide things up. I let her know not to worry about that. The house is entirely in my name, and my husband has already written a will that takes care of everything. Mael knew about the will, but not the ownership of the house. That part clearly caught them off guard. Laura looked to Mael for backup, kind of like a silent plea for help. She said that even if there wasn't going to be any future money, she still felt like my husband had been unfair to her. She used to believe he just didn't want to be a dad, but seeing how he treats Mark made her think otherwise. That's when Misael asked her directly, "Do you know how you were conceived?" And Laura said yes. She knows everything. Laura said she understood her mom didn't go about things in the best way, but insisted it just meant she was wanted badly. That her mom loved her so much, she was willing to do anything to have her. Then she turned to my sister-in-law and tried to connect with her by saying she should understand what it's like. After all, she has a cousin now, and Laura said she'd really love to have a relationship with him. That did not go over well. My sister-in-law looked like she was about to explode, and my brother-in-law flat out told Laura that if she ever came near Mark again, he wouldn't hesitate to call the police. Laura broke down crying. She said all she ever wanted was for her family to love her, just like everyone seems to love Mark. She kept saying none of this was her fault, that her mom wasn't some evil person, she just wanted a family and my husband was the one who denied them that. But my husband stayed calm. He told her the problem wasn't that she existed, it was the manipulation and lies that destroyed any chance of a relationship. If it had been an honest mistake, maybe things would have turned out differently. But they weren't. Then he told her, gently but firmly, that he would never be her father. And that she really needed to talk to someone, meaning a therapist. He said she should think about finding a job instead of hoping he'd bankroll her future. And that after this meeting, he had no intention of having any further contact. Mael started crying and begged both her children to stay and consider family therapy. But both of them shut her down and said they were going completely no contact. Mael is barely hanging on in the family dynamic, he's on thin ice too. As of now, Mael is blocked across the board by all of us. Oddly enough, my sister-in-law and my husband both seemed relieved after making that decision. That same night we all had dinner together. The whole situation got brought up for maybe a minute or two, then we just moved on and talked about normal stuff. There's no fairy tale ending here, I know, but I believe we made the healthiest choice we could, and protecting my husband's mental health is always going to be my top priority. Edit. I want to play devil's advocate for a moment, especially about the financial side of things. Ever since Mark was born, we've been very involved in his life. We got annual zoo passes, we buy him all kinds of fun things, pick him up from daycare twice a week, and even took him to Disneyland Paris once. I have a feeling Mael might have shown Laura photos of all this, which could have stirred up some jealousy or feelings of being left out, that's just my guess. Laura's mom isn't broke or anything, but she does have 2 other kids, and we live in a city known for its student life, which means housing and expenses are sky high. So I get why Laura might have assumed we could help. As for us, we're kind of neutral on whether or not we want kids of our own. It's not something we feel strongly either way about. But I also think that might have pushed my MIL even harder to build a bridge between Laura and my husband, seeing us pour so much into Mark. We did give MIL some pocket money for a while to help her out, but we've officially stopped that too. At this point, she'll just need to manage things with her own pension. Unless Laura or MIL show up again around Mark, I doubt there'll be more to update. And as much as we don't want a relationship with either of them, let's be real, Laura's still a teenager and MIL's a retired woman. They're not villains in a movie, just deeply flawed people. Update 2. Thank you again to everyone who's been encouraging, even those who criticized us. We're human. We're not perfect. None of this has been easy. I really thought things had finally calmed down. We had a couple of peaceful weeks, and I started to believe it was behind us. But, of course, everything blew up again, and I wish I could say I didn't see it coming. Mark's 5th birthday rolled around about 5 weeks after my last update. After a lot of pressure from my MIL and FAL, my sister-in-law agreed to let them come to the party, but made it crystal clear that MIL was not to speak to me or my husband. MIL didn't say a word to us the whole time. But she kept looking, just staring. We ignored it. The problem was that I was holding my stomach the whole time, and my husband kept joking around with me about it. I wasn't pregnant, just bloated from eating foods I shouldn't have. I have a bunch of food intolerances that flare up sometimes, and this was one of those days where I ignored my diet and paid the price. MIL doesn't know about most of my dietary issues. They developed gradually over the years, and with us going back and forth on low contact with her, she just never really got updated. So, I guess she assumed I was pregnant. A week after Mark's party, the real chaos started. Laura showed up at my husband's workplace and caused a full-blown scene. She was screaming at him, throwing things, accusing him of starting a new family without ever taking care of his first child. She was crying, yelling, and making a complete mess of the place. The office manager had to call the police and an ambulance. She also called me. By the time I got there, my husband was in the middle of a panic attack. He was shaking, crying, and convinced he was about to lose his job. I told him to breathe and let me handle it. I explained the situation to everyone, his co-workers, the police, the office manager. Laura ended up being taken in for a psychological evaluation, and the staff made sure to take an extended lunch break so my husband could quietly leave without being seen. I brought him home, still trembling, and got him into the car. He couldn't stop crying. Said he didn't feel safe anymore. We went straight to his psychiatrist. Thankfully, he was available and able to help calm things down. A few days later, we had a joint session where my husband finally opened up more about his past with Laura's mom. What I learned shocked me. Apparently, things were even darker than I'd imagined. During therapy, my husband admitted that Laura's mom had once threatened him with a knife. That revelation broke something in me. Suddenly, all of his trauma responses made perfect, heartbreaking sense. After this latest incident, my sister-in-law was completely done with MIL. She gave her dad an ultimatum: either he leaves MIL, or she cuts him out too. It's a hard decision. My Sael is clearly his favorite person in the family, but he's been married to MIL for over 4 decades. It's tearing everything apart. To help distract my husband, my brother-in-law took him on a weekend camping trip. They actually had a good time. Since then, my husband's been on extended sick leave. His company allowed him to come in just 1 day a week while the rest of the week is covered to help him recover. His bosses have been incredibly supportive. They even said they feel like they failed him by not stepping in sooner. At one point, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and I had a disagreement. I suggested that maybe we offer Laura one final bulk payment and request she use it to get therapy. But they're adamantly against giving her anything. They feel she's caused enough damage already. I had been willing to cover therapy for her. But after learning what really happened between my husband and her mother, I pulled back. My sister-in-law is even more fiercely against offering any kind of help now. To be honest, I do feel bad for Laura. I really do. I know my husband used to feel a little sympathy for her too, same with my SAL and BIL. But after all that's happened, they've all reached their limit. The last kind gesture my husband made was convincing his bosses not to press charges and paying out of pocket for the monitor Laura smashed during her outburst. These days, he spends a lot of afternoons with Mark, just playing, bonding, being present. It's healing for him. Meanwhile, the rest of us, me, my SAL, and my BIL, are leading the effort to give Laura one final offer: money for therapy, but no contact. That's it. MIL and FIL are basically estranged now. And my husband is still seeing his therapist once a week, slowly piecing himself back together. And before anyone says it, I know Laura's a victim too. I know none of this was her fault in how she came into the world. But that doesn't give her the right to re-traumatize my husband. I'm still standing beside him. And yeah, maybe some folks out there think that makes me heartless, but I can live with that. Some of the advice I got early on was actually really helpful, which is why I came back to share updates. I've replied to a few comments about my husband not pressing charges, Laura's confusion, and why we chose no contact. My husband said he didn't press charges against Laura's mom because he just couldn't stomach the idea of seeing her in court. I never truly grasped how deeply all of this had affected him until recently, and honestly, it breaks my heart. For him, for Laura, for the entire mess. One commenter said something that stuck with me. They described Laura as unhinged and blamed her mom for enabling her behavior. They said we were better off cutting ties with both of them. And frankly, they weren't wrong. Someone else even pointed out that Laura's mom shouldn't be anywhere near Patience, given how unstable she is. Honestly, I don't know how she still has a medical license after everything. But sadly, because there's no physical evidence anymore, and because the laws in our country are tricky when it comes to past abuse, there's not much legal ground to stand on. My husband's psychiatrist could support him if he ever wanted to file a report, but even that doesn't guarantee it would make it to trial. As for Laura, we truly hope she eventually gets into therapy. I do understand the pain of being rejected by family. I'm adopted myself, so I don't say that lightly. But Laura has picked up too many of her mother's traits. And with my MIL constantly feeding her false hope, it's created a storm of confusion and entitlement. My parents, who are usually calm about everything, are seriously worried about this entire situation. Then there was that one downvoted comment I won't forget. Someone said maybe Laura wouldn't be so emotionally unstable if my husband had been in her life. That she was just a child, innocent at birth, and didn't deserve to be treated like dirt under his shoe. They argued that if she'd had a loving father figure, maybe she wouldn't have turned out this way. And you know what? I get it. I understand why someone would say that. But let me ask this, did it ever occur to you that my husband was raped? Update 3. Hi again. This will be the final update I share about all of this. I want to thank those of you who reached out, whether you agreed with us or not. Some of the comments were harsh, others were downright cruel, but I can take it. I've got thick skin. What gets me are the private messages from people who didn't even have the guts to say their awful things publicly. If you're going to throw stones, at least show your face. But to those who were compassionate, thoughtful, or just willing to listen, thank you. Truly. After the incident at my husband's office, he put in a request to work from home. He also suggested offering remote work to others on his team, and management agreed. In fact, the change ended up benefiting the whole company so much that they gave everyone a pay bump after they got rid of the office lease. The downside? Because of that salary increase, child support payments had to be recalculated. And with the jump in income, the idea of the lump sum payment we once proposed had to be dropped. It's now likely that my husband will need to keep paying support until Laura finishes university. We're okay with that. We've already set up a savings account to manage it. It's in my name only, for reasons I think are obvious at this point, but we both contribute to it. Then, right when I thought the dust was finally settling, I got a message from Laura's stepfather. I had never met him before, not once. But he reached out, and I felt like I had to at least hear him out. Long story short, he told me he's been trying to adopt Laura for about 10 years. But every time he brought it up, her mother, or even my MIL, would tell him that my husband refused. He also said he was led to believe that Laura had some kind of relationship with my husband all this time. That she'd even stayed with us occasionally, but we were keeping it private. I don't know if the guy is just incredibly gullible or if he was trying to guilt us, but the conversation ended with him promising to finally get both Laura and her mom into therapy. That was back in July. Then, in September, my father-in-law passed away suddenly from a stroke. It was a shock to all of us. His kids organized a beautiful funeral, and that was the last time any of us saw MIL or Laura. At the funeral, Laura mostly stayed near my MIL. But eventually, she approached my husband and my sister-in-law. She was calm and respectful. She even apologized for what happened at the office. She didn't say a word to me, and honestly, I was fine with that. Since then, she hasn't reached out to any of us. We've all officially cut contact with my MIL. She hasn't changed her stance on anything, and the rest of the family knows it. But no one wants to get in the middle of it, mostly because they just don't want to deal with her tantrums. Now, here's why this is my final update and the one good thing I want to share. I'm about 4 months pregnant, and we are over the moon. I know some folks out there will come for us in the comments again. But to those who've supported us along the way, know this baby is a blessing. My husband is absolutely overjoyed. We're focusing on our future now, our little family, and continuing to heal together. That includes my sister-in-law, her husband Bill, and our sweet nephew. When we told Mark the news, his only question was whether the baby would be allowed to go to the zoo with him so he could show them the monkeys. It was the cutest thing. He's already telling all his friends in kindergarten that he's going to be a big cousin. Honestly, I think this baby is going to be a healing experience for all of us. My husband has started opening up more, not just to me, but to family, to friends. They always knew bits and pieces of what happened, but now they know the full story. And as painful as it is, sharing that truth has lifted so much guilt and shame off his shoulders. He's thriving in a way I hadn't seen in years. Maybe this will upset some people. Maybe some will say we're heartless, or cruel, or monsters. But we're human. We're healing. We're moving forward. I hope, someday, Laura and Emmael find healing too. I really do. But we can't get pulled back into that chaos anymore. We're starting a new chapter. And we're doing it on our own terms.